Hello and welcome to the SIS Podcast. My name's Francis and next to me here's the beautiful Jake. Today we've got on Kev Rowland, who is a prolific reviewer, writer. He's been in the industry for a long, long time. He's tried to get out of it. It dragged him back in. So here's the podcast with Mr. Kev Rowland.
Welcome to the show.
Great to be here, guys. Looking forward to this.
And now we let the conversation take hold because we just started.
And fantastic editors.
And the feedback I get from people, they're doing what I want with them because nobody can sit down and read these. This is not a book to sit and read.
No, it's like a coffee table kind of read.
It's a coffee table book. You dip in and out. And I sent some copies to a mate of mine in Thailand. And he was, last time I Zoomed him, he was going, I've been discovering this band, and this band.
Yeah, that's
I said,
exactly
how come?
it.
He said, no, I just went in and I read some of your reviews and went, actually, I think I might like that. Then I went off and found the music. And I'm going, that is exactly what they're designed for.
Yeah.
And especially when you develop a brand of review, like especially with the amount that you are doing, you read a review of yours, you start to understand your taste and you can kind of align them with your own and be like, okay, he felt this way about this band. I'd probably dig them as well. And that's like a relationship that can be developed only through like time served and consistency in that sort of review game.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, I work quite closely with a guy called Olav Martin Bjornsson. He lives in Norway. And we run one site together with the two reviewers, and there's another site where we work on it together. And we actually originally became friends because I used to follow his writing. I realised that his tastes were very similar to my tastes. So I started following because I thought, well, if he's saying something nice about that band, I am probably going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
The difference with me is because I started writing in a fanzine, I ran a fanzine, because I started there, I was writing almost like to a constrained audience. So I developed this style, which is almost like I'm talking to a friend.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if you read my reviews, they're never, this band played this music and it sounds like, because there's always more with it, because I feel like I need to explain a backstory. So when I went to see I'll Be in the Wolves and Looking for Alaska up in Lee, there was the story of the journey and the fact that I used to live there and all this. And I try and make it really personal.
Yeah.
But the other way that is different, I think, for me than for most of people is that I will write the review, I'll check it for grammar, and I'll publish it. I never write a review and then go back to it and edit it.
Right.
I just do it in the moment. And I've had bands publish reviews of mine or snippets of reviews of mine, and I've actually had to go back to the original because I didn't think I'd written it.
Yeah.
Well, it's a capture of a moment, and that keeps it really organic. Instead of going back and kind of recrafting it and tweaking this, tweaking that, you like keep it as you felt and as you heard it at the time. Because what would you say your turnaround is for a review?
If you needed a single done tonight for tomorrow, I'd do it.
Yeah.
I'm always way behind on my listening. So what I've done over the last 18 months is, because I'm now working with MNNZ, what I do is I prioritize New Zealand music all the time. So if Lisa says to me, Kev, can you do this? Can you do it? I never say no, because I'm her reviewer of last resort.
Yeah.
I will pick up, I can't do hip hop, I can't do EDM.
Yep.
But if no one will pick up the soul, if no one will pick up the pop and she's desperate, she knows that she can give it to me and I'll give it a crack.
Yep.
Right, cool.
Because me trying to do something honest is better than nothing at all.
Yeah.
So that where there we have a turnaround. The agreed turnaround is an EP or an album is 14 days and a single is 7 days. Lisa and I work on the basis it's whatever date Lisa needs. So if she gets an album on a Sunday and the release date is the Friday, she'll have it for Wednesday.
Yeah.
It's all about listening. For me, I'm what I call an active listener. I think it's an age thing. I think it's, and what I mean by that is when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, if you were on your own at home, you read a book or you listened to music.
Right.
There were no video games.
Yeah.
There was no internet. There was no mobile phones. There was no distractions. Our TV had 3 channels and it was only on from like 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 11 o'clock at night. So for me, I grew up actively listening to music. Music was something that you did. You used to put on the album, which was 12 inches because it was a record or a 7-inch single. You would look at the artwork, you would read the lyrics, and you would go into the music incredibly deeply in a way that doesn't happen today.
Yeah.
And people your age already, you're past that. And I don't mean because of the age you are now, but what was happening when you were 15, 16, the other distractions that you had available to you.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. It's just different.
Yeah.
So because of that, I listen very, very deeply. And I've had lots and lots of bands comment, how did you hear that?
Yeah.
How did you recognize that? Part of it is that listening, and part of it is I like lots of types of music and I listen to lots of types of music. So my top 10 that was on MNNZ at the end of the year, I did top 10 singles, top 10 EPs, top 10 albums, top 10 live. I think my top album was Troy Kingi.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then Grawlix's, then French for Rabbits, then probably Plum Green, the shirt you're wearing.
Yeah.
Then I think Henneke. Now, that was all folky type or dreamy type or ambient. But Blindfolded and Led to the Woods was in that top 10. And so was...
Eclectic mix.
And so was Bridge Burner.
Yeah.
Right? So was Red Fountain. I don't know who else was in there. I can't remember now. But very different styles of music. And it's unusual to find someone who will quite happily listen to folk and acoustic and then move into the really heavy stuff. Today I was playing music by one of my favourite American artists, Dave Brenner, who operates as Grid Failure. It is the most extreme industrial music you could ever hear.
Yeah.
It always makes me think of a dystopian future in black and white after the nuclear bomb has dropped. Most people wouldn't even describe it as music. There's a lot of white noise. He sometimes uses, the one I was using today uses a lot of organic sounds that he's recorded outside and brought in. But it's distorted, it's weird, it's strange. It's like Art Zoid taken to an nth degree. You know, Art Zoid can and just destroyed even further.
Yeah.
But I can't have, and I get real pleasure out of that. I really enjoy it. But then I might be listening to Fairport Convention or Camel or Motorhead or, you know. So consequently, I think the listening is really important. And the turnaround time basically the turnaround time is based on how much listening I've done.
Yeah.
So we've just come away from the weekend. Tonight's a Monday. On Saturday, I reviewed 10 albums start to finish. I then went out and did a live gig that night, which was a great acoustic gig at Dead Witch with Lorenzo Hazelwood, Bryce Patton and Cloudy. And then yesterday I did another 10 album reviews. So over the weekend I did 20 album reviews and a live review. So it doesn't take me that long to write them. It's the listening that takes the time.
Yeah, especially to digest it properly.
Yeah.
And actually engage with it, like you're saying, you know, like let it take you so that you can actually kind of get in the space either that you need to if you want to, or get into the space of like the artist kind of creating it. Do you feel like you try to dive for that? Like, okay, what was the artist trying to feel? Or do you just let it take you where you want to feel?
A bit of both.
Yeah.
I think it's really important as a listener to try and work out what the artist was trying to achieve and what they were trying to do. I actually listen to arrangements a great deal because to me it's not just the music that's being produced, it's how it's all being put together and what's the production like. You know, I often prefer it where the sound isn't heavily compressed and where so all the layers have been rammed down together. For me, it's much more interesting where space has been used as an additional instrument.
This guy's on the same page.
Yeah.
It's so important and it's massively overlooked.
Dynamics.
Yeah.
Dynamics and contrast is everything.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a teenager, going back, they had this music series on TV and it was called, I can't remember, something to do with rock. And every week, it was only like 4 weeks long, but every week they concentrated on one instrument. And one week it was the drums. And they had Ian Pace in the studio, all right, Deep Purple, obviously. And he was talking about how he constructs a drum solo. And he said, he normally starts off really quite heavy, and then he'll slow it down and he'll go quiet. And then he'll come back up again. And they're sort of going, well, why is that? He said, well, when you're loud, you've got nowhere to go but quiet. You've got to have that contrast. And, I remember when bands like Machine Head and that were coming out in the 90s. I used to get everything that Roadrunner released, so I was in with Slipknot and everything right from very early days. But some of the bands I just couldn't get my head around, and that's because they decided the way to attack it was every single track was going to be at the same high volume level and high intensity level.
Volume.
Everything was maxed out, and I'm going, that's fine, but when everything is maxed, there's no contrast.
Yeah.
You need the contrast, you need the dynamics. And it's that contrast and dynamics that makes music live and breathe.
I had this conversation. I have this conversation daily, but I had this conversation about TV of all things as well, because we watched an old series because we were like, oh, let's go back to the 90s. Netflix exists, and let's just do a thing where we're listening to or watching this whole series. And then they did like a reboot for 2018 or whatever. And so we went and watched the reboot. The music is effectively written the same, but it was so hard to listen to because of the just stark difference and how there's like a level of softness used in this scene and but everything was just maxed out volume. Everything was the same across the board. And I think that for some reason, at some point, I could go on this rant. Stop me now, man.
Keep going.
But like at some point, there was this thing where they valued loudness and compression over all else. It was just, it needed to sound big, and so they just overdid it.
I mean, there was the loudness war that kind of went on. Everybody was hunting to get louder and get louder.
And as much as I appreciate
that transitioned across multiple platforms.
Well, there's also like contemporary funk has recently taken a bit of a switch to that as well. I don't know if you noticed, there was who's the guy who did the lazy... I just don't.
I mean, I'm not too
I'm
keen on
not into funk.
Okay.
my contemporary funk
Anyways,
is pretty loose.
Contemporary funk sort of seems to be switching. Bruno Mars. How did I do that?
Right.
I don't own any Bruno Mars.
It's okay. You're in a safe space, man. It's okay. But like his most recent stuff has gone back to a way where it was mixed in a way that done the same in about the 60s, 70s, like that. And it just sounds so much better. The songs aren't as good, and it wasn't written in a way that it was back then because it was so much better. But today, like, to have it sounding that way in a mix on a contemporary album, I was like, okay, well, that's a million times better. Still not as good, but a million times better. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite record labels is Cuneiform out of America. And they mostly specialize in avant-garde and jazz, and particularly avant-garde jazz. And I reviewed an album recently. I can't remember the name of the band, but it was a trio. And I said it felt like Space was the fourth member of the band.
Right.
And the owner of the record label actually wrote to me and he said, you got it. You really, really got it. Because it was that important. And it's what gets put in, but also what gets left out. I mean, there's the famous true story of Bill Bruford when he was in King Crimson. They were recording a instrumental track which was improvised, and he kept waiting for the right moment to come in.
Yeah.
And he couldn't find it, so he didn't.
Yeah.
He's actually got a co-credit as composer on that track.
For not playing.
For not playing. Because that act of not playing is one of the things that helped make the song what it was. So he actually got a songwriting credit for it.
Nice. Yeah.
And that's part of it, is knowing when to not play.
Yeah.
It's not just finding your place to come in, it's finding your place to step out as well.
Well, there was I don't know if you've ever seen it again because you're so much younger than me, but there was the Aid for Africa and Live Aid and all this thing, but there was actually Hearing Aid as well, which was put together by Ronnie James Dio. And he was complaining about so many things were going on, but heavy music wasn't being portrayed.
Yeah.
And basically ended up with, Dio, the band, in the studio with Frank Benali, Quiet Riot as well. So that was the backing tracks. And then they brought in 1 million singers and 2 million guitarists. And if you watch the video, you see Ungli Malmsteen on there, and he is shredding the hell out of this thing, because he hasn't got fingers. It's just liquid up and down. I wasn't as impressed with that as I was with Eddie Ojeda from Twisted Sister, who played really slowly. In fact, he was the slowest out of all the soloists, but he was the most in tune and being honest with the music that was being played.
Yeah, he wasn't just trying to be fast for fast's sake.
He was actually listening, and it's the best solo out of all of them. And you've got Buck Dharma, you've got a whole load of people there. But he's the one that really stood out for me because he's just slowly following the melody and getting. And at the end of the day, it's musicality, and you should have musicality, whatever genre you're following. You talk to a really good death metal band, and they'll explain to you why they're using a certain tempo. They'll explain to you what they're doing, and it's trying to pick up that complexity and understand it. Because actually, when you strip all music down, it's very simple. And this is why I think it's interesting when I hear people review something and say, "Oh, it's just a noise," and I'm going, "Well, no, it's not. There's a reason for all this.
Yeah.
You just need to get into the head of the artist, the band, and try and understand what they're trying to achieve."
It's interesting you say at the root it's all really simple when, especially say for your books, they're all sort of, a lot of them based in sort of progressive music, and a lot of people wouldn't necessarily say progressive is overly simple.
Yeah, and I think it's quite interesting because I still think you can be massively complex and complicated in what you're doing, but at the end of it, the really, really good ones are quite simplistic in many ways. Progressive rock music, particularly from the 70s, is often lengthy, and it's more like a short classical piece, if you like, 20 minutes long, 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
But good music is good music, bad music is bad music, and it doesn't matter what the genre is. Life's too short to drink bad wine, and it's too short to listen to bad music.
I've drunk plenty of bad wine, but...
Yeah, but not really out of choice.
No, out of necessity.
Because you've listened to so much bad.
Just that too as well, yeah.
I was in the studio with 71 Sunset
Yeah.
A few years back, and we were chatting away, and we were talking about music, and we were talking about what they were trying to do. And they'd just been recording something, and I said to them, "This doesn't sound like Lindisfarne to me." And they're going, "Who's Lindisfarne?" You know, and I was early 70s, northern folk rock band, and they're going, "What?" I said, "No, it's actually quite similar to Caught in the Act. You need to go and find it. It's got a similar sort of pattern." And we were talking about how they would describe their music, because they were alt rock, but alt rock covers a multitude of sins. And I said, the problem is people try to pigeonhole music, forgetting that music isn't a pigeon. I actually said, I think we're going to get T-shirts made up with that.
Music's not a pigeon.
Music's not a pigeon. But it's true. Everybody tries, and even as a reviewer, I will try and put labels on things.
Yeah.
I'll say, this reminds me of, or this is like.
It gives direction for the reader.
It's direction for the reader, because they're not listening to what I'm listening to. But I'll put in 2 or 3 bands that can be very, very different. But it's just how it makes me feel and my reaction to it as I'm going through it.
Right.
Because before we get on to the books and things like that, because that's definitely something I want to go into, what got you into just reviewing in the first place? You know, like the relative origin story, I guess.
You got a chair?
Yeah. Radioactive spider.
Yeah.
Okay, so very simply, and I know it's hard for guys like you to think of this, but there was a time when there was no internet. There was a time when it was really hard to find out information.
Yeah.
And in the early 80s, I went to do my degree in 81, started working full-time in 84. Back in the early 80s, I decided, wisely or not wisely, that the best band in the world was Jethro Tull.
Right, cool.
Now, to help in my search for Jethro Tull material, I picked up a book called Terry Hoonsom's Rock Record, Volume 2. I've got 2 of them now, Volume 2 and Volume 4. And number 2 is just falling to pieces because I lived in it. Because what it did was it listed for every album, he tried to list every album released in Britain, right? I'm not saying he passed or failed, but he tried to release all the rock records released in Britain. For every album, he put every musician. Then at the back, you could find the musician and find every album they had played on.
Right.
Not just for Jethro Tull. So what I did was there's only so many Jethro Tull albums you can buy. Yeah, even though I ended up like 5 copies of Living in the Past and all this sort of thing. At some point you say, well, I need to go and I want to look at other things. And I thought, well, I'd be interested in finding other bands that band members were in prior to Jethro Tull and also after Jethro Tull. And I picked up bands like Paris and Aviator and Bloodwind Pig and Wild Turkey and all this sort of thing. And then I realised that John Glascock, who was the bassist from Too Old to Rock and Roll until he died during the recording of Stormwatch, he had previously in a band called Carmen. He was also in Chicken Shack. He was in Tofat. He was in The Gods. He replaced Greg Lake in The Gods. That's, so they go back a long way. But he was in this band called Carmen. And I thought, for some reason, it resonated with me. And I managed at a record fair or a record store, I managed to buy a copy of Fandango's in Space by Carmen. Obviously, it was only out on vinyl. And I absolutely fell in love with it. But now all I knew about Carmen was what was written in Terry Hunson's rock records. So I knew who the musicians were, I knew what albums had been released, and I knew where they'd been released. But I didn't know anything about the band. So at the time, I was an avid reader of Record Collector. Record Collector back then, in the 80s, was basically as it sounds. It was a magazine for people who wanted to collect records. And although it had features in the front, the vast majority of it was adverts. So what you had to do is you had to get it the day it came out. So when I was working, I used to get it the day it came out, spend all my lunchtime reading through all the adverts with a pen, going, because then you needed to ring or write, no email, these people to see if they still had what you wanted. And it was the one place to find out information. So I wrote to Record Collector and I said, do you know anything about the band Carmen, which featured John Glasscock? They actually printed my letter with my address. And it meant that some people actually wrote to me and offered me material. So I bought Carmen's autographs and I bought a white label of the debut album.
Cool.
But more importantly, I was contacted by a guy called Dave Reese. Now, Dave Reese ran a fanzine called A New Day, which was about Jethro Tull. Now, fanzines in the UK were quite big back then. They were literally underground, for me, underground music magazines. And so I'd been subscribing to A New Day since it started. And Dave wrote me a letter, because it was letters, no email. He wrote me a letter and he goes, Kev, if you manage to get any information on Carmen, could you write a piece for the magazine? And I went, yeah, okay, I can do that. And I did. And that was the first piece of writing I ever had published. I think it was issue 13, back in, I'm going to say 86 or 87, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And then I was working in London and I had, I didn't know anybody in London. It's a big place and I was quite lonely. And I thought, well, what's a way of meeting people? And at the time, there was loads of adverts for Mensa in all the newspapers, the High IQ Society thing. So I thought, oh, why not give it a try? I've got a degree, I may be able to get in. Well, I could.
Nice.
So I got in, went to a couple of meetings, and even though there was 35,000 people in Mensa in the UK, I decided I pretty much didn't want to know any of them.
Yeah.
So a couple of meetings, gave up. But I got the Mensa magazine every month. And someone wrote in there saying they want to start up a subgroup, which was called a special interest group for rock music. And I went, oh, yeah, well, I can do that. So this woman, Georgie Brown, started this little magazine thing. And I started by sending her some articles, all written in longhand. I didn't have a computer or a typewriter or anything like that.
Yeah.
And that went on for 5 issues. And then she went, oh, I'm really, really poorly. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I went, okay. And I'm thinking, well, how hard can it be? I went back through the first 5 issues, looked at them, decided what I liked, decided what I didn't like. And I went, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to change it into a magazine, which is something that people will want to read as opposed to just something that turns up every so often. So I went and bought myself an electronic typewriter with 1K of memory. Because this is way before personal computers. I know, it's like the Ark now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I started running this magazine. I used to write most of it. And literally with 1K of memory, I had a little tiny box on the typewriter. And I used to type it all into the box. Then I'd tell it to print. And it could print 1.5 pages of text. Then I would read it through and see if there was any typing mistakes. And then I'd have to backspace in this tiny window. If I'd made a mistake. Of course, couldn't save anything. There's no real memory there. And I'd done a couple of issues of this. So this was 1990.
Yeah.
And I'd done a couple of issues of this. And I was out drinking with someone one night who got the magazine. And he said to me, what do you know about the Progressive Underground? And I went, never heard of it. Got to remember back in the UK, as in most of the places around the world, the mass media did its real hardest to kill the genre.
Right.
They really didn't like it. For some reason, they liked Marillion, but nobody else. And I think that was just because of Fish, who was the front man. So in the 70s, they tried to kill it. Marillion came up in the 80s. They allowed Marillion, but really tried to kill everybody else.
Okay.
So no one knew anything.
Right.
And I didn't know anything. So the next time we met up, he gave me some copies of a fanzine called Blind Sight, some music by a band named Galahad, and some music by a band called 12th Night. And I went home and I put it on and I listened to it and I went, oh my God. You know, it's just like, oh wow, where has this come from? How come I've not heard of this before? Galahad had a CD and a tape for sale at the time, and I'd been lent the CD. So I wrote to Galahad with a check. So it seems like a different world now.
Yeah, well, that's yeah. I'm having a hard time taking it all in, and then also trying to imagine what this is like as well. So
I used to literally cut and paste when I put the magazine together was cut and paste.
Yeah.
Literally with glue and scissors. Seriously. But I wrote to Stu Nicholson, who's the lead singer of Galahad, and I bought the tape and the CD. And in the letter, I must have put something along the lines of, I write for this little, I run this little magazine thing. It didn't have a name then. And I went, and I'll probably write about it in there. That was all I put, nothing more than that, because it hadn't been going very long. I didn't know what I was doing. This is just something. I wanted to make it better than it was. Anyway, so I get a letter back from Stu with the tape and the CD, all the normal sort of thing, because back, underground band, they didn't have that many fans. So I had a full letter back, not just the music, with some bits and pieces about them and all this. And it was great, wonderful. Thank you very much. Couple of weeks later, a cassette turned up in the post, which from a band I'd never heard of. The band's called Big Big Train. Funnily enough, they're now one of the biggest progressive bands in the UK.
Yeah.
But this is 1991, right? And it's demo tape.
Yeah.
And I've got a letter and a photograph. 2 photos. They hadn't put who was on the photo. Typical. This is bad. Yeah. I had no idea what was going on. And this tape's turned up and I'm staring at it and I'm thinking, someone has sent me music and I haven't paid for it.
Yeah. Right.
I'm a music addict. I'll admit it. There's no cure. So I am. So from there, I literally sat and I'm staring at this letter and I went, oh, it's come from Dorset. Well, hang on, Stu Nicholson's in Dorset. He must have told them. Later found out he had. And I go, oh, that's interesting. So they've sent me a tape because they want me to write about it. Oh, that's interesting. And then the wheels started to turn, right? So I thought, well, the Blind Sight fanzine things that I've been looking at, they've got all these addresses of bands in the back. I wonder what happens if I write to these bands and say, I run this little magazine and would they like anything reviewed? Which, come to think, it was probably a really bad idea because back then in the UK, no one was writing about progressive rock music. There was a couple of little fanzines, most of which didn't last very long because it's hard work to put all this together. So very quickly I started getting flooded with material, started going to gigs. There's this whole scene that I had no idea existed. And I threw myself into it. Another year or two later, I went, well, I've got the bands. I wonder what labels would think. So I started getting everything from Nuclear Blast and Century Media and Earache and I literally got everything they were releasing because there were so few people regularly writing. Yeah. And it's the regular thing.
Yeah.
Between 1990 and 2006, when I moved to New Zealand, I put out 81 issues of feedback and because it got a name after issue 11, and that was about 11,000 pages.
Far out.
And so it was a massive part of my life. I was putting these out like every 6 to 8 weeks, and it was intense. And I wasn't just covering, there was other people writing for it as well. But what we used to do normally is I got told at one point that I was breaking the staplers and we could only have an issue that was 80 pages long. I said, okay. So I used to put out either a double or a triple every 2 months, and I would write all of the first.
Right.
Then I would then get so many. I used to get like 50 sent back to me, and then I'd send that out to the bands and the labels. Excuse me. Yeah. I started off with this typewriter with 1K in memory, went to an Amstrad. Woohoo. Finally got a PC. Broke I don't know how many printers.
Yeah.
But the thing was, my wife always knew where I was because I was at home. Now, to context this, my wife and I started living together in 1992.
Yeah.
We already had 2 kids. So between 91 and 97, I was a night manager at one of the largest supermarkets in the UK. So I was working either 4 or 5 10 to 12 hour night shifts every week.
Yeah.
And we had 4 young children, all girls, and I was running the magazine. So my wife always knew where I was because I was just in somewhere writing. I wasn't out. The only time I was ever out was if I was at a gig. I managed a band for a while and all this sort of thing, wrote newsletters, tried to help out where I could.
Jeez.
Then I came over here in 2006 and I tried to cut ties with everybody. I told all the labels, PR companies, bands, I am not doing this anymore. I've finished. I've retired. I'm going to New Zealand. We're going to have a new life. And it's over. It's been a great run, 16 years. Thank you very much. And I got away with it for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And then it
just comes pulling you back in.
Kev, I know you don't do this anymore, but would you mind just... And gradually, and it did take me a long time to start really piling in. But by about 2011, 2012, it was getting silly. These days, I probably get offered 40 to 50 albums a week.
Yeah.
I try my level best to take no more than 3 or 4 if I can. But the problem is, like the other day, I got offered the new Scorpions album, and you know it's not going to be as good as they were back in the day, but you're going to take it.
Yeah.
You know, you got to, haven't you? There's no choice. I mean, at one point, I used to take everything Nuclear Blast gave me. Now I go, I'm only going to take the bands I actually already know I like because I have not got time to do justice to do other stuff. Right. So I work on 3 rules now, which is if a band contacts me directly, I always review it.
Okay.
If someone sends me a physical product, I always review it. That's less and less these days. And if I choose to download it, I review it. And what that means is not every review I write will be a good review.
Right.
Because they're all honest reviews.
Right.
So if you send me a piece of crap, I will tell everybody
it's a piece of crap.
I had a guy contact me, it was last year. I actually told a lot of people on this site I was writing for about it as well, just to make them aware. And I gave him a 2-star review.
Yeah.
And he had a right go at me. Because you didn't have to pay for that. And I went, no. So? But I sent it to you and you didn't have to pay for it. I went, yeah, and I'm honest. No, can't you just put it up 1 star? I can't have a 2-star reviewer. And I went, nope, because that's not fair on everybody else.
And that's not, there goes your credibility if you start to do that.
Exactly. And, you know, I was at the gig on Saturday and I was talking to, I know Bryce really well from Downfall, obviously. But I was talking to Lorenzo and Cloudy before the gig, and they're asking me how the review is going to work and all this sort of thing. So I told them all about it. I said, but you need to know something. If you suck, I will say you suck.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, because
no pressure, but
if I think you're crap, I will say you're crap.
Yeah.
In a constructive manner.
Yeah.
There's no point being destructive. I will always say why.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, how do you learn? And I remember seeing Mariner at Dead Witch 18 months plus ago.
Yeah.
They played for too long. Adam lost his voice, and they should have stopped when he started to lose his voice. They should have cut to the last number and gone, but they actually played about another 4 numbers before they went to the last one, and I roasted them.
Yeah.
And I saw them a couple of weeks later at another gig, and they went, thank you, we needed to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And that's the thing, keeping it constructive lets them take something from it. There might be some precious ones that take it to heart and hate you for it or whatever it may be, but at least you've still sort of maintained your integrity while you do it.
You've got to maintain integrity. At the end of the day, I'm like that in everything I deal with. I try to always be brutally honest and straight. The people I work with and the vendors I work with, they love it because they know exactly where they are with me all the time. I don't sugarcoat anything. They know exactly where they are with me at all times, and that's what you want.
Yeah.
I mean, my 3 books have been called the Bible, right, by Record Collector, which to me was fantastic because that's actually where it started. So it's a full circle.
Yeah.
Realistically, it's not the complete Bible because it only starts in 1991. It goes back into the 80s somewhat. But if you want the Old Testament, you need to have the Strawberry Bricks Guide to Progressive Rock, which is by Chaz Snyding. So Chaz and I, we say that he's the Old Testament and I'm the New Testament, and you put them together.
Right.
You've got a Bible with just about, and his goes up to 82. So it's only about 7 or 8 years missing in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
And there was this woman, this person on Amazon, she bought all 4 books, slammed mine because it was full of neoprog, because that's what was around in the 90s, and then slammed Chaz's as well because she just didn't like it. So we both put the reviews up on Facebook because we just found them funny.
Yeah.
Coming from reviewers, like coming from a reviewer yourself, like getting that, because how did it feel actually getting
a review?
Getting a review as a...
It's been very strange to be on the other side. I think the good thing for me was a lot of people whose opinion I value highly, right from the off, said how good this was. Because this is actually one big book. I mean, what it is, it's it's all of my progressive rock writings that I did for feedback between 1991 and 2006. And there is virtually nothing written about that period. Now, originally it was going to be one book. It's literally A to H, I to S, T to Z, plus interviews and live. That's how it breaks up. But when I put it together, it was more than 500,000 words, and the publisher said it's too big. And I went, yeah, I know. And he said, right, so what we're going to do is we're going to break it down, and I want you to put in all the artwork. And we'll put the artwork in, and then we'll break it down into separate volumes. And that's exactly what we did.
Awesome.
That would have been a journey of a thing to try and get all the artwork sorted.
Well, yes and no. There was only one album that I really struggled with, and I managed to find an old email address of the person whose album it was, and it was still active. But the thing is, for some reason, I decided really early on when doing this that I would never get rid of a demo tape.
Yeah.
So, although over the years I've had to cull my CDs multiple times, I've probably got rid of about 3,000, maybe more.
Bet.
Yeah.
I still have every single demo tape I was ever sent. So what that meant, I was able to copy the ones that were going to be impossible to get are actually the demo tapes because no one's got them.
Yeah.
I have. So I could copy the demo tapes, and there was just that one album cover. So that was great, but it was a lot of work. You got to remember, do you remember me saying about an electronic typewriter with a 1K memory?
Yeah.
That was then photocopied and not printed. Yeah. I tried to use optical character recognition and just couldn't cope. I had to do it all from scratch. Yeah. So it took me more than 2 years to get the text to a place where I was ready to give it to the publisher.
Right.
So literally between 2014 and 2016, I didn't do anything apart from type up to start with, and then proof checking.
Yeah. I was going to ask, did you end up just sort of dropping off from anything else you were doing for that kind of period of time?
Yeah, I stopped doing all reviews.
Yeah.
And again, I told everybody I was stopping. And at the time, I didn't have the 3 rules. So stuff that was being sent to me during that period, I took it and I kept it.
Right.
I put it to one side, and it's still in my list to review
to listen.
now.
Right.
Yeah, because it's listening and writing,
Yeah.
I know that as of last night, because I always check every Sunday, I've got 351 albums to review.
Far out.
And that's before I take anything this week. Luckily, there was nothing today that I wanted, so that they all get filed. But I get literally, offers all the time. And I was going to say I haven't taken anything today. I have, because Lisa asked me if I'd pick up the Erase album. Yeah, Lisa's different.
Yeah.
I take whatever Lisa asks me to do. But yeah, the rest of the stuff. The weird thing is Plum Green and Blindfolded and Led to the Words are both promoted by Dave Brenner, the grid failure guy, from New York.
Right.
So I actually found out both of them originally from New York.
Right.
Which is pretty cool when you think about it.
Yeah. Two very different artists.
Both in my top 10, but very, very different artists. The first time I saw Blindfolded play was in Christchurch a few years ago at Christchurch Student Union, right? Which had a sloping ceiling.
Right.
So imagine the sound. Now you need to realise that the headline act that night was Sepultura.
Yeah.
And then the next support act was Death Angel, and then Blindfolded. So you started off with death metal, then you had thrash metal, then you had groove metal.
Yep.
In a venue which was small with a ceiling that was like this, and the sound just bouncing everywhere.
So by the time you're done, you're just sort of got that pressured ears, and you're just going.
I just never thought I'd see Sepultura in a venue that small. I was beside myself, to be honest. Yeah.
That's your memory for a lot of like what you've done in the past, and just the breadth of it and everything like that, and the detail you're still remembering. Like, is that something you've always kind of had, or is it just around music and your sort of addiction to music, of which there is no cure?
It's all to do with the addiction. I'm crap at names. I'm crap at dates. I have to write things down. I'm not one of these guys who can hear his wife through the years saying, "Oh, it'd be nice if we," it comes to birthday and Christmas, saying, "You've got to give me a list, otherwise you're going to hate it." But I can remember at school, used to in my exercise books, inside covers, I would write down band details. The members of the band. My dad wasn't into popular music, but he was into jazz.
Right.
And I don't remember him playing jazz when I was growing up. I think he'd already stopped listening to it as such when I was young. I remember him playing 8-tracks in the car.
Yeah.
But I don't remember him ever playing vinyl. But I was fascinated by his vinyl. And one of them was a album by Bunk and Lou. It's two different musicians. It was two different groups actually on the same album. And what they used to do with jazz albums in the 50s quite often was you'd have a picture on the front, and the rear would tell you all about the recording process and who was involved and everything else.
Cool.
And this was recordings from the 40s. And that album really impacted me because it was the first time as a young person I'd thought about the recording process and what it actually meant.
Yeah. Cool.
Because I had this thing when I was really tiny. We used to have a program on the radio called Junior Choice, where they would play Puff the Magic Dragon and all this sort of thing. And I honestly thought there was just some musicians sat in easy chairs who would be playing the songs, because I'm like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And this was the first time I'd really thought about music as a process. And it really resonated with me. And what's really strange is I was at my dad's back 10 years ago. I'd gone back over the UK for the obligatory visit like you do. And it was the sort of, what do you want when I die sort of thing. And I said, well, I want all your crystal glasses and I want all your jazz records. And he went, we can't have the glasses because I'm using them, but you can take the jazz records now.
Right.
And I took them, and that Bunk and Lou album is now framed and above my desk.
Wicked.
And I actually then found it was on, it's available as a CD from Amazon, so I bought it and I put it on, and I was terrified because I was in my 50s, I still hadn't heard it. Late 40s it must have been. And I love it. You're
like, what if I think this is trash?
But
How are you going to judge your dad after that?
I mean, the album had a massive impact on me. The thing is, when I was doing my O-levels, which is the exams you'd used to do when you were 16 in the UK, I always used to play music whilst I was revising or working on, getting everything ready for the exams. And because I liked my own music too much, I used to play a lot of my dad's jazz records, but I never played that one. But I really got into Jack Teagarden, the trombonist, or Gene Krupa, the drummer.
Cool.
And I still review and listen to. I was listening to reviewing jazz yesterday. There's a couple of jazz labels that sends me material. So,
cool.
But I never download jazz. I get sent physical copies of jazz.
Yeah.
So
There's like it's a real nature to jazz.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I can listen to Rio, rock in opposition, progressive rock, and a lot of people just go, that, what? Cuneiform, the label I was talking about earlier, they released this most amazing box set about 5 or 6 years ago by Art Zoid, who are a French collective group, and it was called 44 and a half because at the time it was released, they'd been going 44 and a half years. And it is so out there with weird brass and strange time signatures and just really unusual music, which for some reason to me makes total sense. And it's actually a set that I've always got with me, if you like. It's always on my phone. I know it's not the same playing on your phone. It's not the same playing through Bluetooth headphones, but it's the mobility thing, I'm afraid. I'm working up here. My home's down there. I can't grab the music. So you do what you do. And there's something about it that resonates with me. And it's like, it took me a long time to get into Can. Took me a long time to get into Zappa. I think I was terrified just because of the size of the catalogue.
Right.
Where do you start with Frank Zappa? And in the end, I think I'll just go and buy Hot Rats and go from there.
Start in the middle.
And it's, I think I've read a lot about music. I read a lot about music. I love reading music biographies. And the whole scene behind it, if you like, it's not just the music making, it's the community behind it.
It's not just the product. It's everything that goes in and around it that makes it what it is.
Yeah, and I listen to other people's opinions. I mean, one site that I used to use a lot, I don't have time these days, is Rate Your Music. I don't know if you know it, but it's a wiki site. And you can go on and you rate albums that are on there, which is, it's interesting. If you want to go and have a look at, say, Deep Purple, right? What does everybody, out of the thousands of people who reviewed the Deep Purples or rated the Deep Purple albums, which is the one that I ought to try? Well, it's probably going to be Machine Head, I would have thought, but, it shows you. But the other thing you can do is you can actually go to the genre. So it's like I went off and I said, okay, I wonder what's the best acoustic folk blues albums pre-war. I've got this whole list up. I said, great, there's my starting point. I'm going to go and buy that one. Because I'm not saying the masses are right, but this site is only looked at by people who are genuinely interested in music. And I follow people. I used to, one of the sites I write for is mlwz.pl. It's one of the top sites in Poland, surprisingly enough. It's run by a mate of mine. We've been mates for 30 years, but we met through music. And I like his style as well. So I'll actually go and have a look. He has a radio show every week. So I'll actually go and look at the playlists to see what he's been playing. Because I know if he's been playing something I've not heard of, there's a chance that I'll like it. And then I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
So it's back to finding people who you feel you can trust.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself... Oh, no, you go.
No, I'm just saying, do you have time to listen to an album more than once? Like after you've reviewed something, do you ever go back to...
Rarely.
Rarely? Yeah.
It's the big issue.
Yeah.
That I rarely discover music for myself that I want to listen to.
Yeah.
These days, because I'm offered so much and because I'm so far behind. So I turn back to old favourites. So late at night, if I want something relaxing, the chances are I'm either going to play some Anthony Phillips or I'm going to play Camel's The Snow Goose.
Okay.
Technically, this is wrong because I've kept the French for Rabbits album, the Grawlix's albums, and the Henniker albums I've actually kept them with me because they impress me so much. It gives me something else to try because all those three albums are so different.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've heard Henniker. Have you heard that?
No.
She went out and she captured a whole lot of birdsong.
Actually, yes.
And she's used that as a basis for the albums. And there's one which is, I think it's called Forest Dawn. It's about halfway through the album. But it's got Moorporks on it.
Yeah.
And when we used to live north of Auckland and we used to hear Moorporks all the time. And now we live in Christchurch. We don't hear them at all. Yeah. And just hearing that song just made me feel, oh wow. Because I used to sit on the deck and hear them calling to each other through the woods.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, generally, no, unless an album just really stands out to me. So
it's got to really stand out.
It's got to really stand out. Because I generally don't have the time. I keep very little. It'll be music generally that I'm going to play late at night. I tend not to keep metal with me.
Right.
Because I've always got so much metal to listen to that actually I need to get on with what I'm supposed. So I tend to play metal during the day. I need to keep listening to what I'm supposed to be listening to.
Yeah.
So it tends to be late night when I tend to, okay, I'm going to switch my ears off and actually enjoy music because listening to music to review it is it's like listening to music to produce it.
Yeah.
You listen in a very different way. And people who don't do that don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you've got to get really deep inside. You've got to be really listening.
And there were stages when I was starting out as like doing music production that I'd be doing recordings so often and then going straight into the mixing process and then sleeping and then waking up and getting started and then when you do get that break, you go to the grocery store and it does your head in because you can hear everything. You are listening to everything. You can hear conversations. You can hear things bouncing off the roof. It just drives you insane. So having that decompressing time to just...
Yeah. And I do... I watch very little TV.
Yep.
I tend to watch probably an hour a day, maybe an hour and a half, which actually is very little in the context of things. And when I say TV, I mean that's probably going to be YouTube as much as it is going to be Netflix.
Digesting visual content.
Yeah. But I read.
Yep.
Or I'll relax just by playing something gentle. You know, Anthony Phillips, who will always be renowned for being one of the greatest 12-string acoustic guitarists ever, actually released a piano album. That's the album of his that I tend to listen to because it's just gentle. Because he's not a trained pianist like he is a guitarist, he actually took it slow and steady, and it's all about melody and composition and space as opposed to how clever I am and look, you can't do this sort of thing. So it's again a very different, certainly a very different style for him.
Yeah.
But to be honest, if I need something to blast, I've normally got Motorhead, No Slope Till Hammersmith, because I find if you're feeling a bit down in the dumps, you can just put that on and you're wide awake after a couple of tracks. You know, I interviewed Lemmy years ago, and he genuinely was exactly the same and everything you'd hope he would be. Walk into the room with a massive bottle of Jack Daniels, take the top off, throw the top away, turn the music up in the corner, and he was the genuine article. He really was. He was such a great guy.
Yeah.
That's something that's different nowadays. And I'm not saying that's better or worse, because a lot of people that sort of went hard like Lemmy did, you know, they're coming to the end of their run. But there's a genuine nature that comes from someone like that, which doesn't necessarily come across in modern music. I think people are trying to find it or trying to mimic it, but they're not landing.
Because I think there's like a driven thing for people to commercialize it. And I think being involved in the music itself is getting lost.
I think there's the difference between being famous and being a musician.
Yes.
Because most musicians would not be seen dead going on New Zealand's Got Talent or The Voice, or actually The Voice, its concept is a lot better, I have to say, than all the rest, but you know, that sort of show. Because they want to be a musician. And, you know, Bruce Dickinson years ago said something along the lines of, you're not going on that sort of show because you want to be a musician. You want to go on there to be famous. Yeah. The person who wants to be a musician is the busker down at the tube station.
Yeah. He
wants to play. And this is one of the reasons I get so involved with the underground scene. Originally, it was the progressive underground. Now here I am working to do whatever I can for the underground scene here, because I hear amazing music every gig I go to. And I feel so blessed and then so annoyed that there's not hundreds of people there, thousands of people there with me to see it. Certain bands seem to get picked up by the media. Alien Weaponry obviously have created a fantastic name for themselves. Yeah. And rightly so. They're a great band. I'm not knocking the guys at
Straight
all.
Up.
And they're really nice guys. And they've managed to do incredibly well. But there's a whole lot of other bands that I'm not going to, I'm not going to say, they're as good as Alien Weaponry, but I'm going to say they should be attracting more than 10 people at Dead Witch.
Yes.
Or 15 or 20 people. I mean, I've been there. In fact, the three of us have been there when pretty much the audience has been the other bands.
Yep. Yeah.
Which is just terrible. I remember that's the last time we met. It was Cafe Fist Fight we're playing at Dead Witch.
Yes.
And you said to me, I had forgotten just how good these guys are.
Yes.
Because technically, they are none of it should work.
Right? None of it should work.
None of it should work.
There's a guy with a Hawaiian shirt up there. It shouldn't work.
But they do only let him play bass.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough.
But I mean, you've got an acoustic singer-songwriter who's a really good acoustic. You've got a shredder.
Yeah.
And they try and put all this stuff together, and you go, that can never work. Oh boy, this is good.
Yeah.
It works.
It works incredibly well. And you think, why is it that there's only 20, 30 people playing, coming in to see them.
Yeah.
And then it gets on to another rant of mine, is that a lot of bands feel that, they want to play, they'll play a gig almost like whatever the price. So they'll play at Dead Witch.
Yeah.
And you could have a 4-band bill and it's $5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$10. At the weekend, I was at an acoustic gig, which was at Dead Witch. It was they were trying to raise money for the venue, and I think it was $25.
Yeah.
Three acts. They played for a couple of hours, and I'm going, I think $25 is really good value for that.
Yeah.
Much better than $5.
Yeah.
And it's, I think because music has become a disposable commodity, it's not valued anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want the door charge to be a barrier of more people in front of them. But then that's devaluing what
So
it is that
people
they're
aren't going to
providing.
show up. Yeah.
It devalues the product itself and all the work they've put in. What's a musician? Or he's a person who spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours practicing his craft. He's turning up with some very valuable equipment, speakers and guitars, pedal boards. Look at the size of the pedal boards these days. And they're doing it they love the music. But at the end of the day, there should be, there's got to be a way to monetize it somehow.
To make that work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, this is like a different kind of gig, but like, as you said, you like the music. Can you do it because you love the music? There are times where I've definitely done it and enjoyed some of the gigs where no one showed up and the most, so it's like us being drunken assholes playing to our girlfriends, best gig ever, right? Got the whole bar to ourselves. It's fantastic. And the promoter's sitting in the corner really pissed off at themselves because they messed up, but best gig, I just, for me, as a musician who just wants to play, I understand that logic, but it's just unsustainable.
Yeah.
We've all been there. We've all had to go, all right, well, it's $5 a gig. Let's just, fuck it. Hopefully somebody comes, and then your mom shows up and you're stoked. But, how is that going to continue your career as a musician? How's it going to
keep people around?
Keep people around.
I think one of the problems as well is too many bands don't think of themselves as businesses.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they're a business. So going back to our Friends Cafe fist fight and the man with the Hawaiian shirt, the man with the Hawaiian shirt looks after the merch.
Right. Nice.
Right.
Bassists, eh? Ugh.
So I got asked one night, Kev, would you like a shirt? I said, great. Yeah, that'd be very nice. Thank you. What size do you want? XL? What colour? We've got white or grey. I said, grey would be fine. So off runs Dan, drummer, off he goes, comes back out and he goes, Jess, where's the merch? I think it's on my bed. So the band have come out and they've played, and say there was 10 or 15 people there. They've got no product to monetize themselves.
Yeah.
One of the bands that I'm a big fan of in the way they do things, and that's Melanie.
Yep. They're making waves at the moment.
Yeah, but rightly so.
Yeah.
They've got good music, it's catchy, but also, you look at them. The first time I went to see them play was at Wine Cellar, and they had, their album was there on vinyl.
Nice.
They had a couple of different T-shirts for sale, and they had stickers free of charge.
Yeah.
So everybody was going to pick up a sticker if they weren't going to do anything else, and they would put it on a book, or they'd put it on their fridge, or whatever, and they'd go, "Oh yeah, Melanie, that was a good night out, wasn't it? Oh, do you know they're playing again soon? Oh, we ought to go and see them. That was a good night. Yeah, I remember that." It's not rocket science, but I've seen too many bands play. They're only playing at a small venue, and they'll have nothing, or it'll be, "Oh, come and see me afterwards." We've got some stuff out the back. No, have them on hangers. Have them up by the side of the stage. Put them on the sound desk. Anywhere where people can see them.
Yeah.
And you don't need to be selling them for a lot of money, but the whole point is keeping the name out there. I mean, tonight I walked in here, you've got a plum green shirt on. We immediately started talking about her and her music, which we wouldn't have done because I wouldn't have thought that you knew her.
Yeah.
With her now being based in Melbourne. That conversation started purely because of the band shirt that you're wearing. And that's what bands need to do. They need to realize they need to monetize themselves. A lot of bands, they annoy me.
In multiple ways?
In multiple ways. One of the ways that bands annoy me is they'll go into a studio, they'll pay, hopefully, a decent amount of money to come up with a decent product, and they will then send it out.
Yeah.
No press release. No artwork. No nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast where Tamatera Smith was talking, and he said something that just really resonated with me, and I've repeated it a few times since then. He said, you've gone into the studio and you've created this very, very special thing. And what you've done is you've walked into the biggest library in the world. You've taken the tallest ladder. You've put it on the darkest shelf in the furthest corner, and you expect people to find it.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I've written quite a few press releases for local bands, because as a reviewer, and I've been doing this for well over 30 years now, I know what I like to receive. So therefore I write them in that manner. I write quite a lot for AAA records as well. But bands don't seem to think about it. I mean, I'm not going to mention the name of the band, but the band put out a single which had been recorded with Dave Rhodes. So should we just say that the production was probably pretty hot?
Yeah. Seemingly so.
Yeah, seemingly so. Really great song, really pulled together. Great video. I'm not going to say he recorded the video because it'll work out he stood in the room. So I contacted the guitarist and said, because I'd seen it on Facebook, I said, the single's coming out. Yeah. Why haven't I got it? Oh, sorry, Kev. Sends it to me. And where's the video? Oh, sorry, Kev. Sends me the video. Where's the press release? What's a press release? Okay, we can fix this. Would you like me to write the press release for you? Yes, please. So I wrote the press release and I sent it to him. And I said, what do you think? I said, because I always say to the guys, you can change anything you like. I'm not precious. I'll give you a first draft. What I've noticed with lots of the bands here, they'll just take the first draft and not change it, which is fine by me because it's less work.
Yeah, cool.
But I'll give them the first draft. And he said, Kev. And I said, yeah. He said, what do I do with a press release? Bands don't know.
No.
Yeah.
And no one's going to teach them. So I said, go to AMIC. There's information on there. You'll find lists of radio stations and all this sort of thing. When you send the single out, you need to be sending the single. You need to be sending the cover art in a high res. You need to be sending a photo of the band if you've got one, and at least the press release and any other information you may have. And you send it as an EPK. What's an EPK? Electronic press kit. Oh, okay. But it is like that. And when you think the investment has been made on getting a fantastic, because Dave Rhodes is one of the best in the business. Yeah, we all recognise that. You're not bad at doing videos.
Broke that wall.
But no, seriously. I mean, investments have been made. Yeah. And at the end of it, you come up with this really great package. But unless you then take it to the next stage in the right manner, no one will ever even see it, let alone hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, I always believe that I go the extra yards. If I get sent first off, I get a streaming link sent to me, which often is the case. First thing I'll go back to the band and say, I don't want a streaming link. I don't like reviewing off streaming. Yeah. I want a downloadable file. Oh, right. Okay. And what information have you got? Can you point me to where I can find out more about you? Some bands just do nothing after that. And then what I do is I will actually make the effort to find their Facebook. I will make the effort to find their Bandcamp. I'll make the effort to do, but very few will. And it's because of my love of what I'm trying to do here. But I know lots of people in radio stations, and if they just get music turned up, they won't even listen to it. Could be the next best thing, but they won't play it because they know nothing about it.
Basically, I think, so going back to let's go back to your early career when you were talking about how you got in touch with these bands, right? What gets me is that people are writing each other back. What gets me is that that was what I found shocking the most when you're talking about, is that there were actual responses, letters and bits that they're sending you and all of that kind of stuff. And the reason why I found that so shocking is that with today's musician, what they're seeing is people becoming successful with just an online thing, not realizing all of the background work that goes into it or all of the money that gets poured into it to push that. But that's all that they're seeing. So they think that is all the work that they have to do. It's just that
to put it out there.
Yeah, and it's say we were laughing about copy and paste. Yeah. When I was putting the magazine together particularly in the early 90s, I didn't get a computer till late 90s. It was hard work. Yeah. It really was. And literally, I would be sat on the floor with typewritten sheets and a pair of scissors and trying to work out how to make it fit, and how to pull it together. I had to handwrite the page numbering on it because there was no, because it wasn't coming out digitally. But you're saying about writing and that, it just made me think of something. There's a Canadian band called Mystery, and they've just released a live Blu-ray and CD, DVD set, and I've written the introduction for it. So if you open up the booklet, the first 2 pages are my scribbles. The reason I mention that is that I know something that I bet you guys can't tell me. Well, who was your first ever email to in your life?
Oh, Jesus.
Oh.
It was to my mom, and I got in trouble for it. Now, I remember because I wasn't allowed to have an email address because it was like online and scary, right? So I went to school and used their computers to start an email address, and I found out my mom's email, and I was like, look at this, Mom, I've got an email address. Kind of just cheekily be like, hee, 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 hee. I got in so much trouble for that. So it's memorable for a reason.
Well, in April 1998...
Yeah,
I started working for Safeway stores in the UK, and we were running an IBM mainframe.
Yeah,
and there was a way we could actually send communication to each other inside the IBM mainframe. So it wasn't an email as such, and it wasn't an email address, but you could send it internally within the mainframe. Then a couple of us discovered if you tried to send it to an external email address, it would break and send you an error message. But then if you took the right bit out of the error message, you could then send that you could then use that as a proxy for the email address.
Okay.
And the very first person I did it to was Michel Sampere from Mystery, right? This is April 1998, and I've never forgotten, I sent him an email, and he must have been online because he responded straight away.
Yeah.
And he lived in Canada. And I just sat back in my chair and I actually said out loud, the world has changed. So now it's come full circle, and I've just written this stuff for their new Blu-ray.
Yeah.
But it's just the world now is so different from what it used to be.
So different.
And one of the problems these days is that anybody can put anything up digitally.
Yeah.
And it's actually harder to find the good stuff.
Yeah.
I think having music available digitally is fantastic because it's released some barriers for bands, some cost barriers.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I've heard some self-produced home studio stuff for some bands that's been very good.
Yes.
But it also means you get an awful lot of stuff up there which would never have been released if it was back in the 90s or 80s when you actually only had a physical product.
Yeah. Some of that bad wine still gets through.
It definitely does. It's my job to tell you it's bad wine.
Yeah. I feel like we could talk for literal hours.
I did tell you.
Could.
Yeah, because we could. And I'd absolutely love to have you on again in future.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
I can talk about music all the time, and to actually talk about it with people who understand it, to me, that's just great.
Yeah. Next time we'll get designated drivers.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been
thanks, man.
awesome having a chat. And we've been talking about doing it for ages, and we finally managed to get it to happen.
Yeah, it's only taken 18 months.
Yeah. There's been a pandemic that gets in the way and other production issues.
Don't they know that we're trying to do stuff here?
Yeah.
Well, we did actually have a date arranged before the last
literally
the week before.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
This has been a blast, guys. I've loved it. So, looking forward to having a catch up next time.
Yeah,
awesome.
for sure. Because if people want to sort of check out your work,
buy your books,
as the books and your reviews and stuff like that, where can people find you?
The books are easiest to find on Amazon, to be perfectly honest. They're on all the Amazon sites. As for reviews, music.net.nz is all my local stuff. And again, you can search for me there. And if you want to go on to progarchives.com and look for me there, and again, it's Kev Rowland. I don't believe in hiding behind nicknames.
Yeah, cool.
You can find my music bio there and all the things I'll be doing, and actually all the other sites I write for as well.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thanks, Kev.
All right.
Thanks,
guys.
so
It's
much.
been a blast.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Thanks a lot.